Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to people in other time zones. Welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Coordinating Director for Humanities team and one of the summit hosts. Great to be with you today. Today is day 7 of the Living in Oneness Summit. This summit has been extraordinary so far, and I promise today will be the same. Over 15,000 people have registered for the Living in Oneness Summit, and registration is still climbing, so we have a large listening audience with us today. We are broadcasting live each day with at least 2 programs, and we're talking about how we can come fully alive as part of the divine. Many people we know share that life has become stale, but as we know, life is such a gift. There is so much more we can experience. This is what the Living in Oneness Summit is about. Opening the door to the divine so we may receive our gifts and live the life we were intended to live. Thanks so much to each of you, the listeners who are listening live and who are listening via audio links. As a reminder, there is a $100 discount during the summit for those who purchase upgrade packages during the summit. The upgrade packages allow you to again and again come back to the wisdom being shared and to share this wisdom with friends and family. MP3 links, written and digital transcripts, CDs of the 30-plus leaders that are part of this year's program are included in these packages, and also from last year's program in 2013, including Ken Wilber, Irvin Laszlo, Panache Desai, Joan Borisenko, and many others. Now I'd like to introduce our special guest. Our guest this hour is a powerful business leader who has been the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, who works with Fortune 500 companies, and who is known as the guru of oneness in business. I'm going to introduce you to him now. Dr. Lance Secretan is widely acknowledged as one of the most insightful and provocative leadership teachers of our time. He is the former CEO of a Fortune 100 company, university professor, award-winning columnist, and author of 15 books about inspiration and leadership. His teachings and writings on conscious leadership are courageous, radical, and ingenious, and have been hailed as among the most original, authentic, and effective contributions to leadership thinking currently available. Individuals, entire organizations, cities, and states have experienced remarkable transformations through his unique mentoring, coaching, wisdom, and approach. Lance has also been a good friend to me and to Humanities team and has helped us on many occasions. Welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit, Lance. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Steve. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, looking forward to this hour and have been for quite some time. Lance, there's so much to cover in the books you've written, the programs you've created, et cetera. I thought maybe we could start at the beginning here as we start the hour with this decision you made decades ago when you were running Manpower, Inc. You were the CEO of this company. It was a few thousand people. You grew it to 72,000 people worldwide. You're 40 years old, and you step away from Manpower, Inc., and you look at what you're going to do with the rest of your life, and you decided to become a business consultant and base your practice around oneness. So what a fascinating decision that was, and I wondered if you could just kind of take us back in time to what was happening then, why you made that decision, and maybe just a little bit about your journey back then and to now.
Well, one of the things that people who haven't run a big public company may not know is that it is very demanding. After 14 years, I was, I wouldn't say spent, but I needed a rest. My options were to continue for another 14 years or however long, and I just felt that physically I couldn't probably do that. So I hopped over to the university and ended up becoming a professor in a business school. And I got a big shock because what I realized was that what we had been doing for 14 years and built this amazing, successful organization, which today, by the way, is one of the largest, if not the largest employer in the world with over 4 million employees. So in those early days, I looked at the textbooks that we were using in the universities, and I was shocked because they were teaching stuff that was nothing close to what I'd actually been doing. And so I was being asked to use these obsolete textbooks to teach, and I thought, that's ridiculous. It's just not correct. So I wrote my own book, and that became a bestseller. And then eventually I got calls from companies saying, could you come and talk to us about your ideas? And so that got to grow bigger than my university teaching. So eventually I couldn't handle both, and I ended up migrating to the outside of the university, which is a very good decision on my part, because the university, if you want to learn something, it's the last place you go to do that. So the rest of is history. I've been out in the big world doing that work ever since, and 14 more books that followed.
Yes, I've got one of them right here in front of me. One, The Art and Practice of Conscious Leadership. And, of course, there's another terrific book out now, The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch. I wanted to talk a little bit about both of those. But let's stay with let's just kind of unfold this, because it's fascinating what you've done. You are today known as the guru of oneness in business. And of course, I came from the business background myself. I was an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley and was active with the Young Presidents Organization and other organizations, so I know the business world well. And it's not an easy thing to bring the practice of oneness into business. Fascinating that you share that what caused you, it sounds like, caused you to take this path that you're on as you were teaching at the university. You were looking at the wisdom that was there in books and instruction, and you were saying, "My God, this isn't getting to what my success was about, or the business world, and innovative thought that I know." So you had to write your own books and sort of create your own path to steer in the direction that you're in today. Huh?
The book one really tackled that in a very thorough way, because I helped the reader figure out how we got to this separateness place, and that's where we are today in large part. But we weren't, so we started in oneness, and the example I often use is that if you think about Native Americans and the way they deal with time, for them it's circular. So things go around in a circle for them. So it just keeps repeating. So spring comes, and then summer, and then fall, and then winter, and then spring comes back again, just going around in circles. Well, that's not the way we think. We think linear. We burn up our seasons. So we have spring, summer, fall, winter, and then another spring, not the same one, but another one. So we're on a linear stretch. Well, now, if you go back to check the fundamental beliefs of all the Aboriginal peoples. So I'm talking about Maoris in New Zealand, and Bantu in South Africa, Aboriginals in Australia, the Inuit in northern Canada. Anywhere you go and talk to Native people, they will tell you that they share the concept of circular time. So here's the question. How did we all know that same idea of time when we had no way of communicating with each other that we know of, certainly not the internet or mail or even horses and ponies, I wouldn't think, in 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. So there's an example of how oneness prevailed. And then we got Socrates and Plato and so on, who gave us rational thinking, and from there we get the Middle Ages, where we start to have people like Descartes and so on, who start to invent what we now call the scientific method. And what that meant was that we had to disaggregate everything, in other words, pull it all apart so we could understand it. So we didn't look at the whole anymore, like Native Americans did, for instance. They would look at the whole in terms of the weather and the climate and the plants and the rocks, and it's all one. But we don't do that. We not only don't look at them as one, we see them as separate. But indeed, we go further than that. We look at the rock and we analyze it in all its chemicals and its small parts until we have arrived at a stage today where we are completely rooted in separateness. In other words, we analyze separate religions, demographics, age groups, geography, politics, values, beliefs, religions. Just about everywhere you look, it's about separateness. So when you're running a great organization, the more you do that, the less effective you are. And the more you help the organization become one, the more powerful you are. So we're going right back to a 6,000 or 7,000-year-old cycle, which we've forgotten, and we need to remember.
Fascinating. And, of course, I can see exactly what you're speaking about. We go back 400 or 500 years, and, of course, we pulled the body apart, and the spiritual was handed over to the church, and the medical was handed, the physical body was handed over to to doctors. And Western medicine today still has separated the body this way. So, and that's just one example.
Yeah, in healthcare, it gets deeper, as it does in every field. So you can be in a cancer ward and have 7 people standing by your bed, all clinical specialists, all with different disciplines, and including, you may even have financial administrative people separately from the clinical people too. And in most healthcare systems, they're not even joined together. So the administration and the clinical have different hierarchies and are run quite separately. So the lack of integration is endemic there. How can you treat a patient as a whole, or holistically, if we could say that, put it that way, when you can't even run your own business that way?
Absolutely. Lack of integration, disintegration, which is where we are today. How do you, Lance, now we're really getting to your practice, which you base in oneness, and you work with Microsoft and Humana and these large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 organizations. How do you walk in this message of oneness, and that the problem, or a big piece of the problem, is this separation that we've seemed to have evolved into?
Well, it's interesting, and I think I'm somewhat unique in this way, that most of the people who really understand consciousness and conscious leadership, and I don't suppose any of us really understand it, but some of us get a little closer to it. Many people start inventing a vocabulary which moves you into the sort of woo-woo, on the edge kind of place, which makes people in the business world nervous. And actually, they not only nervous, but they can't translate the value. They can't figure out, if I understand forgiveness, for example, or peace, concepts like this, how is this helping me increase shareholder wealth, or increase my market share, or improve the performance of my company? So the pieces don't fit together very well. So what we have done is we have decoded this to the point where we can say, look, if you function this way, this outcome is going to happen. And if you function, on the other hand, this way, this outcome will happen. Which do you prefer? So if I give you an example, one of the things that happens in healthcare, which we do a lot of work in very large healthcare systems, there's a chronic shortage of nurses. Now, the truth of the matter is there's no shortage of nurses. There's a shortage of places that nurses want to work in because they don't like working in hospitals. But there's tens of thousands of trained nurses doing other things because they don't want to be nurses anymore. So now we get into, well, why don't they want to be nurses? It's because doctors yell at them and treat them as third-class citizens and as separate instead of as one. So in one big healthcare system, we were asking the doctors to practice what we describe our work as higher ground leadership. And they basically told us to go fly a kite. So we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's take another tack here. We sat down with the doctors again and said, look, we're going to add $100,000 a year to your income if you practice higher ground leadership. Are you interested? And they said, where's the effect? Oh, well, since you put it that way, yeah, it probably would work for us. So now we have the key, right? And we don't care how we get there, really. We just want them practicing oneness. And when they see the results and notice that they're not retraining nurses all the time in the OR, and they don't have to hire temporary agency nurses who don't know what they're doing and therefore make mistakes in the OR, and therefore the efficiency increases, and they actually have far less people in the OR than they would have done before, and they don't have to keep retraining people because their staff turnover declines. All of these things add up to higher performance, better income, and better results. And so they say, gee, there's something to this.
Huh, fascinating. I've seen the presentation that you share with your large customers, and it opens up with oneness, the heart of higher ground leadership, and then it says, we've been living in the illusion of separation. So is this how you unfold the story as you're back in the beginning developing a relationship with these new corporate clients? You're just framing this aspect of what oneness is and separation is, and then bring it back to the business results?
It's one of the ways. The thing that we really concentrate on is inspiration. Because what we know is this. Whenever we are separated, or let me phrase it a different way. Whenever we're hurt, wounded, broken, in pain, or performing poorly, it's because we're separated from what and whom we love. And whenever we're inspired and joyful and happy and successful and performing at a high level, it's because we're one with what and whom we love. And this explains all of life's adventures. So as long as organizations are separating people and functions in a way that makes them unhappy, and they usually are, they will continue to underperform. And so I simply say to companies, you're doing really well. Most of the companies we work with are very successful. So they don't actually need a whole lot of lecturing from me because, a company like Microsoft, there's nothing wrong with Microsoft. They're in fantastic shape. They've got $80 billion in their bank. I mean, they're in great shape. But supposing we add a magic ingredient that you don't have right now, which is inspiration. We're not taking anything away. We're adding something. If you're as good as you are right now without being inspired, what could you be if you were inspired? And the way we get to inspiration is through oneness.
Yes, and that, of course, your slide presentation ends up with this beautiful discussion of inspiration, and you've got a picture of Nelson Mandela, who was just a premier inspirer on this planet. Let's go back to, though, just to delve a little deeper into this aspect of when we separate from who or whom we love, we feel pain, and when we're connected with who or whom we love, we feel joy. Do corporate customers want to unfold that and get into the discussion of who and whom we love in the pain aspect, and then the reverse where we're connected and the joy aspect? Do they try and unfold that, or because it's kind of an abstract notion?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? The work of translating this is what's so important. Yes, if you just put it out like that, certainly. But I can tell you, and I often do tell my clients, I'm not in Colorado now. That means I'm not skiing. That means I'm not one with the mountains. Therefore, I don't have as much joy. Much as I love being with you in Detroit, I'd rather be up at a 12,000-foot mountain dancing with the mountain. That's when I'm one with the mountain, I'm in bliss. Now, I'm also separated right now from my wife because I'm not at home with her because I'm with you. And therefore, that separateness is not good for me either. So these are just day-to-day practical living examples of what happens to us when we are separated from what and whom we love.
I love that. Yeah, that certainly makes it very tangible, doesn't it?
Well, they get to see that and they say, okay, so now, why do people leave your organization? Most companies have staff turnover that they would love to fix, and it's costing them hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Why? Because they feel separate. If they were connected and felt one with you, they'd never leave. And that's true of everything in life, by the way. As soon as marriages fall apart, it's because there's a separateness within the marriage. And oneness is about the joy of being married and being in love and so committed that you can't afford to leave. I mean, it would break your soul.
Yeah. Absolutely. All of these domains of our life, with our wife, with our kids,
right.
in the workplace, which we're going to go deeper into this discussion. Certainly true. Why do people remain in the workplace that they're in? That's that sense of community and connection and joy from what is being co-created, or the absence of that, and that causes people to leave, isn't it?
And said that way, it's not rocket science, is it?
Yeah, no, not at all. Well, beautiful. Inspiration. Let's go deeper into that, because that is a big part of your practice, to go into this discussion of inspiration. And it's a deep discussion. Would you like to just kind of step through that more? How are you framing inspiration, and what are the steps that you lay out?
The thing that is intriguing to me is that we complain about so much. What's wrong with the world, and what's wrong with corporations and politics and all the rest of it. And yet we continue to do the same things. And I know that this is a definition of madness, but it just baffles me that we keep doing this. I mean, if I just give you a stark example, you've got a company like Southwest Airlines that has built a successful business model and has made profit every year for 30-odd years, over 30 years. And then you've got all the other companies, United, American, Continental, Delta, and so on, who have basically gone bankrupt, while watching Southwest Airlines follow an entirely different path. I mean, wouldn't you think somebody in one of those companies would wake up one day and say, whoa, what's going on over there? Those guys keep making money and we keep going bankrupt. Maybe we should do something different. But they don't. They keep doing the same thing. Now, this has always been a mystery for me. I just do not understand how that happens. So let's take a look at how we lead and how we run the human resource function of businesses. As a matter of fact, we could say we run everything. We run it on the basis of fear, and we run it on the basis of motivation. So motivation is about manipulating, controlling, and altering the behavior of other people for my benefit. And that's what we do in marketing. Buy my product or you'll be ugly. That's what we do in religion. Join my religion or you go to hell. That's what we do in academia. Pass this exam or I'll fail you. That's what we do in business. Do what I say or I'll fire you. That's what we do in parenting. Do what I tell you or I'll punish you. That's what we do in entertainment. It's all about violence and domination and war and so on. And in every field, this is how we've developed our practice and our thinking. So leadership theory is based on manipulating the behavior of others and motivating them. And human resource policy is the same, because it's all about compensations and rewards and punishments based on performance. Now, if you think about motivation, it is a really unproductive method, because it's all about me, it's not about you. So if I offer you a bonus in a sales job, for example, and I do that to all the other salespeople, I'm not trying to be generous to you. I'm trying to make my targets because I'm the sales manager. And the way I'm going to do it is motivate you to perform at a certain level. And I'll do that by effectively bribing you. And your fear-based outlook is that you're afraid of not getting that bonus. Well, now let's look at inspiration. Now, the thing is that we confuse motivation and inspiration because we think they're the same thing. We say, I want to be motivated and inspired, but actually they're almost exactly the opposite. If you think of a great mentor or teacher or coach in your life, and we all have them, this is a person who inspired you. They didn't need anything from you. It wasn't fear-based. It was actually the opposite. It was love-based. It was a service to you. It wasn't about them at all. They didn't need something from you. They wanted to give you something. And so we have simply become experts at motivating. Everything is built on that. And we are in the dark when it comes to inspiration. We simply don't have corresponding theories, literature, practices, and models to work with. We teach, to this day, we're still teaching motivational theories. And we teach the work of B.F. Skinner and Pavlov and so on to underpin the logic and the science of why motivation works and how good it is. But in reality, it isn't inspiring. So people in organizations are numb from the motivational experience. But what they're really yearning for is inspiration. So the most important human need is to be loved and to love others. The second most important human need, though, is to inspire and be inspired. And that is what we're not serving in the modern organization. And that, as I said earlier, is achieved through oneness. So you see the connecting parts here. Now, I'll just summarize this by saying motivation is the need for another, and inspiration is the love for another. Motivation is lighting a fire under someone, and inspiration is lighting a fire within someone. That's the difference. So the move is away from the reliance, exclusive reliance on motivation, towards a growing practice of inspiration. I'm not saying one's bad and one's good. I'm just saying they're different, and we don't even know the difference.
Fascinating. Motivation, lighting a fire under somebody. Inspiration, motivation, or where we're lighting a fire within somebody. I love that. And this book that you've written, The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch, it kind of unfolds a whole spiral effect, doesn't it? You talk about this, how we inspire first, something within ourselves, and how that just, these dominoes fall that go all the way out into the world. Can you talk a little bit about that, Lance?
Yes, we understand. I mean, I hope I presented a compelling argument that makes sense, that we need organizations that are inspiring. I mean, why do I buy an iPhone? It's not a better phone than other phones. It's actually not even as good a phone as other phones. But I'm inspired. I'm inspired by Steve Jobs. I'm inspired by Apple. I'm inspired by the way they approach business, by their creativity. I'm inspired by all kinds of things. Now, it may not last. That's another story. But that's the history up to now. Why do I fly certain airlines? Why do I buy coffee from Starbucks? I mean, these are inspiring organizations. And it's totally ridiculous that I should pay $5 for coffee, but I do it because I'm inspired. So the story really is about, I get it. We need to be inspired in organizations and have inspiring organizations, and that's nice to say, but how do I do it? So the spark, the flame, and the torch, the history of that is that 14 books up to then, I looked at them and I thought, these books really sort of stand alone. I mean, it's funny paradox really, but there's a bit of separateness here. What we really need is to pull this together so that it's one. And so I looked at what was no longer relevant, what needed tweaking, what needed to be added that was new, and created a sort of overarching theory, which we call higher ground leadership, and that's the spark, the flame, and the torch. So if you look at this, you have to, if we're going to be inspiring to other people, I can theoretically do that. But the reality is, I need to be inspired first. I can't just walk out and be inspiring. I could do it for a little bit, but eventually I'll just run out of my own gas, and I'm trying to pump gas into other people. So I just can't do that forever. It's just not going to work. It's just illogical. So I need to be filled up first. When I'm full, I can then inspire other people. So now the question, that's the spark. So now the question becomes, how do I do that? And the spark has three parts. The first is what we call a why-be-do. Why-be-do is a whole process and methodology we've developed over the years. And by the way, on our website, secretan.com, there's a whole piece about the why-be-do, including a why-be-do forum where you can post your own why-be-do and look at other people's, and hundreds of them from all over the world. But the why-be-do is a statement of why I'm here on the planet, how I'm going to be while I'm here, and what I'm going to do. Now, it's interesting that we try to lead organizations, and we have no clue who we are. And that is a beginning step of oneness, because what we're doing then is integrating everything about our lives into one focal point. So why are we here? That's my destiny. How am I going to be while I'm here? That's my character. And what am I going to do while I'm here? That's my calling. So destiny, character, and calling, that's step one. Second step is about building relationships. Every organization that I ever worked in has dysfunctional people, especially at the top, but all over. And one of the first things we want to try and help them with is to change those relationships so they don't feel separate, but they feel like one. And so there's a sense of oneness amongst the team, so that they then are the team is built on inspiring relationships. There is an old expression that says that we join organizations and leave people. And what we're trying to do is the opposite. We want to say you join an organization and then you get glued to people as one because you love the people that you're working with and you're inspired by them. So that's step two, and then the last step of the spark is about having a dream. And here again, we are, as you will have gathered, we're very radical, and we basically think that most modern methodologies and thinking in business are obsolete. So, for instance, mission, vision, and value statements are a great example, complete obsolete thinking. Most organizations couldn't tell you what their mission statement was, even though they've spent thousands of dollars and all kinds of hours building one. And if I were to take everybody's mission statements from a variety of different companies and shuffle them all up together and hand them back at random, I bet most people wouldn't even know if they got their own back or not, because they're all pretty well the same. So what we're replacing that with is a dream. And a dream is a really powerful aspiration for how you're going to change the world. So you mentioned Humana. Humana is a perfect example. Humana was a company that was around, had about 12,000 employees when we first started working with them, about $15 billion in sales, about the 100th biggest company in the country. And today, their stock has gone in that time from $12 to $117 today. The company is 4 times the size it was then, has approaching 60,000 employees, and is one of the top 10 success stories on the New York Stock Exchange. That's the power of a dream. When people come to work and you ask them, why are you here? What do you do here? And they say, well, we have a dream. I'm working for a company that has a dream. That's inspiring. And that is about oneness. How do you create oneness? We don't have all kinds of separate functions and aspirations and so on. We have just one thing. That's why it's called one dream in our language. That's a copyrighted description. One is written in capitals. It's one dream, not lots of dreams, not a different dream in different parts of the world of the organization or different functions or departments. There's just one dream. Everything in the end is about serving that one dream.
Yeah, I love, as we've talked, one of the things you've shared is, as you've said, when we operate from oneness, we go from depleting to nurturing. We go from the profane to the profound. Beautiful. And I suspect you see that in these companies that you work with. And I know you sometimes you come in from a department and, you know, maybe not at the top of an organization, but often you grow that base and you become involved sooner or later with the president and CEO. And some of these organizations you cite as examples of ones where there's been just enormous change as they've embraced oneness, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting how Humana became a client of ours. They wanted a speaker at a women's leadership conference. So they had this fast-track group of women leaders at Humana, and they were bringing in outside speakers to share with them their thinking, whatever their subject matter was. And I spoke to this women's group about the things we're talking about on this call, and it was the highest-rated presentation that it ever had. And so this women's group, said to their leaders, we need to do more of this. Let's expand this. And so it grew internally and eventually ended up with the CEO, and he embraced it and so on. But I'm telling you that story because the hunger in organizations is so fierce for this as opposed to the normal mumbo-jumbo that goes on in organizational development and training and leadership development and so on. It's just so boring and repetitive and redundant, and what they're looking for is a way to introduce concepts like oneness, love, like a dream, like talking about the soul. And as a guy at Humana said to me, he was the Senior Vice President of Strategy, so one of the top 5 executives in the company. It's actually the first session I ran for them was his first day on the job. He'd just come from another company. And he looked at me during a coffee break, and he said, you know, I see what you're doing. What you're doing is you're transforming corporate America from the profane to the sacred. And I had never heard that term before spoken in the cockpit of corporate America. It's just not language that I was used to hearing. And so it was an enormous breakthrough for me that I thought, wow, corporate America is actually getting this.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, I love it. And again, as a person who devoted my life to business for several decades, I really appreciate the magnitude of what you've done. It's challenging bringing in oneness and laying out the benefits. As you shared at the beginning, Lance, part of where your success comes from is it was in the languaging, that you worked very hard to create this languaging that, as you mentioned, wouldn't sound woo-woo and that would cause people to embrace you rather than reject you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's one of the things, there's many, many ways we could discuss this, but let me give you one example. Remember that the core underpinning principles of modern business are motivation, fear-based. So how do we express that? Usually with the language of war. So what you'll hear within organizations, actually throughout our society, but it's very prevalent in organizations, is language like, let's dominate the competition, let's kill the competition, let's introduce a killer app, wow, this blew me away, and so on. In other words, the language of violence, aggression, and domination in war. And we use sports metaphors, we use war metaphors, and we think that this is a successful way to grow an organization. But the reality is that when I say, Steve, I would kill for your hair, which I wouldn't kill you, but I would certainly love your hair. But, I mean to say that in the kindest way, and yet the word kill has so much toxic energy associated with it that it actually makes us sick. So within organizations, when we speak that kind of language, we're actually undermining everything we're trying to do to build an organization. I mean, I can't imagine that Buddha, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, Christ, Gandhi would go up to someone and say, I'd kill for your hair. Or would they say, oh, that's chocolate cake to die for? I mean, they just wouldn't say that sort of language, and that's not the language you're going to hear from an inspiring person. So one of the first things we do is we teach people to recalibrate their vocabulary so that what we're actually doing, we can measure inspiration biochemically. I could take a blood sample, for instance, and in that blood sample, I would be able to find different chemicals. So, for instance, I would find stress hormones, cortisol, and so on, if I were to say I would kill for your hair. Whereas if I were to say I love your hair, I would find endorphins and opiates, the body's natural uppers. So what I'm saying to you is that inspiration can be described as chemistry. Now, this is a way of decoding oneness. If I just talk about Yogananda, for example, that's going to just fly past most corporate executives because they want an Excel spreadsheet that shows them exactly what the outcomes are going to be. Well, I can do that. I can do that with biochemistry, if you would like. I can do that with the metrics and the outcomes that we're likely to accomplish, because it's not really that difficult to describe an inspired team will function this way, and an uninspired team will function this way. And here's your numbers. So that's a couple of examples of how we translate this into action, because we're looking for people to take action and to stay with it long enough for the results to materialize.
Yeah, I love it, and certainly the results speak for themselves. The clientele that you have, the 15 books that you've created. We're going to come back. I think Lance mentioned secretan.com is the site you can go to. That's spelled SECRATAN.com.
R-E-T, yeah.
R-E-T, I'm sorry, .com. SECRETAN.com to learn more about Lance and his books and the services that he's created for corporate America. Fascinating. Lance, if we can, let's segue over to just the aspect of living in oneness in your own life and with your partner, and in all of the way we're framing this summit is we're talking about living in oneness and the 5 pillars for success, and those 5 pillars start with our own life, then with our significant other, in our family life, in the workplace, and then as a leader where we're out doing public service. And you've already mentioned actually a lot about leadership, of how we can light this fire within people as opposed to under people. So those are the 5 pillars. Maybe we can step through those, starting with your practice for living in oneness in your own life. I know when you're here in Colorado, Lance splits his time between Canada and Colorado. He's down here near us for about 6 months of the year, and you've shared with me one of your practices that you invite your clientele to that involves living in oneness. It's fascinating.
Right.
I'm sure there's several things you could share with us. Could you take us through some of these practices for living in oneness?
Well, certainly. I do need I have the urge to point out that when we talk about 5 pillars, we already have created separateness. So it's interesting to me that, we could reframe that by saying there's only one thing. It's called life. And you can't separate it. You can talk about home and work and spirit and so on, but they're not separate. We separate them because we're using the scientific method to try and understand things and learn. But it can't be separated. So if you've got someone at home who is, for example, going through an abusive relationship, and then they come to work, we can't say, oh, that's separate, because it's going to upset their performance and their health and their spirit. So they're all connected. We have to talk about the whole thing. And therefore, when I'm coaching, I do a lot of coaching work with corporate leaders. And when I'm coaching, I say to them, this is going to be about everything. It's not about just your leadership style or your role as a CEO or whatever. This is about your whole world that is one thing. So to answer, that's not the answer to your question, but I just wanted to introduce that thought, because we do spend a lot of time trying to separate things, and in reality, that's where we get lost. We want to come back to the idea that, look, we want to be one with everything. It's all the same. So the mountain, I live at 10,000 feet, and we ski 12,500 feet or so. And I bring leaders down to the mountain, or up to the mountain, and I teach them how to ski double black diamonds in one day. I'm a fairly competent skier, and I like to use skiing as a metaphor. Because if you think about it, what happens for most of us is we learn how to ski at an early age, and then we, in our 20s or so, we start to level out a little bit, and then we plateau some. We get married, have responsibilities, have mortgages and jobs and so on, and so we start to decline a little bit, and then we start to get a little older, so we get a little creaky, so we tone it down, and eventually, we stop altogether. So that's the sort of bell curve of a skier's life. And we, at various points, don't change that. We don't suddenly sort of accelerate the upward motion of that curve, at least not in the later part of our lives. So if you think about it, that's a metaphor for everything. That's how we parent. That's how we lead. That's how we do everything in our lives. So the idea here is to show people that in one day, not just over a long period of time, but in one day, we can achieve a breakthrough that is life-changing. And there are techniques for how we do that, but part of it is about being one with the mountain and trying to undo, and this is the hardest part, what people have learned. So the first thing people learn is how to snowplow in skiing. And of course, if you're standing on top of a cliff that's 2,000-foot drop and a 60-degree pitch and you snowplow, you'll kill yourself. So you absolutely do not want to do that. Now, I tell people, I will not take you down this cliff until you promise you will not snowplow. And everybody's saying, they're looking down that cliff and they're saying, oh, crap, I don't like the look of this. And they snowplow. I say, well, we're going to stay here until you stop doing that. So we could do the same, couldn't we, in every aspect of our lives. People simply cannot grasp the idea that in order to move on to a new way of thinking, you have to give up the old. And you can't get to the new until you give up the old. So that is the secret sauce that everybody always asks me, what's the special technique? Well, there isn't a special technique. The technique of getting it down the mountain is easy. The special secret sauce is letting go of what you think you know. And so that's really what we do in kayaking and mountain biking in the summer and skiing in the winter. And, of course, really everything else, too.
Yes, and isn't that a truism for life and for the planet? We have to release in order to make room for the new. So fascinating that you bring that in to your oneness practices. Let me share that we are down to our final 8 minutes because we need to allow about 5 minutes just to cover some things before the half hour comes up. That the half hour, all of the tapes and everything stops. So many people are listening in to the recordings, and they don't get to hear the whole program if we don't hard stop and allow time for the end of the program. I want to share, first of all, just so much information, so much wisdom here, Lance, and it's so thoughtful and creative. You mentioned Southwest Airlines as an example of an airline that's really doing things different, and it's wonderful to see you as a business consultant that is doing things so different. You're really standing corporate America on its head with many of these practices that you've created. Let me share just about the summit, just so I kind of get that in. Of course, our practice here, or what we advocate within Humanities Team as we talk about oneness, is just creating this time for this silence, for the process of going within and connecting with the divine, just making that time to connect with the divine. And that, of course, is what creates the health and well-being. And as we talk about these 5 pillars for success, it's actually a flowing over, a spilling over of that wisdom, of that love, of that connection to our marriage, to our parenting, the workplace, public service leadership. The reason we break it out as 5 pillars is just so we don't, as kind of as a framework, so we can make sure to get to these different parts of our life and see what is happening, regarding this spilling over. How is the marriage nurtured? How is our parenting nurtured by oneness, the workplace, and public service leadership? So that's why we created the framework that we did, and you've addressed many of those already. Lance, I know you've got a really beautiful and close relationship with your own wife. You've talked a little bit even about that here. You mentioned that when we talk about separation and oneness, just being here right now, you're not with her, you're with us, and you can feel that. But can you bring in a little discussion of oneness with your wife and family? Just bring in that aspect. We've got about 6 minutes before we go into the wrap-up.
Well, the things that amaze me about some marriages is I'm amazed, for example, that there are secrets in a marriage. I'm amazed that people have different bank accounts. That's separateness. We have always had one bank account. and, two signatures on the one bank account. I trust my wife, and my wife trusts me, and she's not going to blow it all away. And, if it ever got to it where I'd worry about that, then I'd have a separate account. But that's just a little example. But we are absolutely two souls in one flame. And anybody who knows us knows that. And this is after 3 decades. So we are in love as much today as we were, if not more so, than we were when we first met. And we still do the silly things that lovers do and romantic folks do, our treats and our surprises and so on. So our relationship is just rock solid and beautiful. And it evolves, but I think it's very much about, and I don't mean to be a marriage counselor here, I don't know enough about it to do that, but about a deep respect at the very core of our relationship, which is built on love and oneness.
Wow, so simple, isn't it? And just remarkable. I don't need to tell you in today's world to describe your relationship that way. And I'm blessed to have a beautiful wife inside and out, beautiful kids as well. But sometimes just getting down to the simplicity of not 2 bank accounts, one, trust, honoring, respect, no secrets, just the simplicity of that.
Right. And there's my employees used to say to my wife, "Can I talk to you about Lance for a moment? I just need to get your opinion." And she would say, "Well, sure, you can, but you do understand that we are one, and whatever you tell me, I will share with him. So before you do that, just be aware of that. There are no secrets with us. You can't confide in me and expect me not to discuss that with him any more than the other way around would work. So just get used to that idea."
Yeah, doesn't it? Oneness, it's just this expression of when I was talking about how we often discuss this, just setting aside time in this overstimulated world with all of these digital devices, et cetera, to go within. And I didn't go further than that. I just left it at go within. But, of course, when we go within, we connect with this incredible, amazing, beyond words love, which is the creator within, the one presence that connects us all, and just bathing in that energy. And it does this with, just as you describe, it's beautiful, describing how this manifests in your marriage, in your business consulting.
The technology actually helps, and I think it partly has to do with how we look at technology. We can look at technology as an interference, a distraction, or we can look upon it as a facilitator for oneness. So when I can be texting my kids, for example, who can be traveling or all over the place, or I can be another place from them, but to know that I'm that close to a heartbeat, really, by a simple text message. I mean, that message, that sentiment came from the fingertips of one of my lovely daughters a second ago. That's how close I am. That's oneness. Whereas, old days, I'd be sending a letter or a telegram or a phone call. I mean, that's clunky compared to today, where these instruments give us this magical connection that's instant. I love that. That's just, for me, a totally inspiring example of oneness.
Yes, it is. I've mentioned before, I'll share again, I'm looking at my text messages here on my phone, and mine are always really simple with my wife and kids. It's love you, 5 exclamation marks, and happy Mother's Day, love you, XOXOXO. With my son, Dylan, my daughter, 9, doesn't have a device, so I can't text her, but the text messages with my son are the same thing. Love you, love you, love you.
Yeah.
And so wonderful. It just, it does make you feel so connected, and it brings some real value to texting when we can express love, doesn't it? Or stay close, when we're
That's
separated
right.
by geography and that.
Right.
Yeah. So absolutely, taking advantage of what is here, which is technology, using it properly. I was a technology executive myself, and technology used properly is so valuable. It's just that we don't want to let it take over our life and not make that time to go within and connect with the divine and have it just bathe our whole life as it can if we make that time. So, well, let's go ahead into the wrap-up phase here. I want to share, first of all, Lance, with you again, so much wisdom. Thank God that we're recording this and that I can not only listen again, but I can review written transcripts because you've laid out just a wealth of material for living in oneness in our own life and in the sphere of business. Very, very innovative, thoughtful, creative ways to bring oneness into business and create value in the business, and best of all, just to create all the fruit of oneness, which makes the organization stronger as people become closer. All the things that you shared, these benefits of what oneness are in a business. So thank you. I knew that we were going to have this kind of discussion, and I've been looking forward to it for some time, and you certainly didn't disappoint. The summit, which started this past Wednesday, has been extraordinary. There's been so much wisdom like this that's shared, and today was just certainly on that level. In fact, maybe we're raising the bar every day. It's just incredible, the wisdom that we're getting to. I want to thank all of the listeners, again, that are here with us, and those listening in. There is a 48-hour free replay, and we encourage people to take advantage of the 48-hour free replay around the world. And then for those that do want to come back to the wisdom again and again and again, there is this $100 discount we're offering on all of the 3 upgrade packages during the summit. And you'll have the opportunity to really look carefully, kind of put under a microscope, the wisdom that Lance has shared during the hour. I want to also thank my colleagues that are here, Dee Meyer, John Thomas, Nanette Kennedy, who have helped create this summit and that are running the programs and the communication devices. Thank you so much, and to all of the other people that are part of Humanity's team who have made this summit so successful. I want to thank the listeners, all of you who are listening in. Thank you for prioritizing this time and for not only focusing on coming alive as part of the divine in your own life, but bringing that out into the collective. It's just exactly what Lance was sharing as he was talking about his book, how inspiration travels. It starts within ourselves, and then it travels out into the community and out into the world. And all of you who are listening to this program and making this a priority are doing exactly that, and we thank each of you. I want to mention the website again that you can go to. It's secretan.com to learn more about Lance. That's spelled SECRETAN.com. You can learn more about Lance Secretan and the many different programs that he offers, and also spiritual activism things that he offers. There's a petition, for example, that you can sign there. Next, I want to share where we're going here in the next hour. Coming up in about 30 minutes is Lori Hyland, who's going to talk about money in the quantum economy, which is a key component in conscious business. So money in a quantum economy. It'll be a fascinating discussion with Lori Hyland. John Thomas, who's one of the hosts for the Living in Oneness Summit, is going to have that. We'll be doing that interview. That starts right at the top of the half hour in about 30 minutes from now. So we'll close with a final thanks again to everybody. You, Lance Secretan, will certainly have you back. Thank you so much, and thank you to my colleagues and all of you, the listeners, who have been part of this summit. It's been fantastic, and there's lots more ahead. We'll talk soon. Take care, everybody. Take care, Lance.
Thank you. Bye-bye.